Hi, in this part of Genesis, we are in Genesis 18 and continuing in verses 16 to 21. Now, we just had the, uh, the Lord in human form and the two archangels repeating to Abraham and Sarah, "Is anything too hard for the Lord?" And that was referring to Sarah and Abraham having a son, though they were both very old, and Sarah had been barren all her life. That is, up until this moment. But you see, did God and the two angels just visit Abraham to wish him well on his new baby? No, there was more to it than that. So we start in verse 16. And the men rose up from there. The men, well, that was the three men. One represented the Lord directly, and the other two were angels. And the men rose up from there and looked toward Sodom. And Abraham went with them to bring them on the way. And the Lord said, "Shall I hide from Abraham that thing which I will do? Seeing that Abraham shall surely become a great and mighty nation, and all the nations of the earth shall be blessed in him. For I know him, that he will command his children and his household after him, and they shall keep the way of the Lord, to do justice and judgment, and the Lord may bring upon Abraham that which he hath spoken of him." And the Lord said, "Because the cry of Sodom and Gomorrah is great, and because their sin is very grievous, I will go down now and see whether they have done altogether according to the cry of it which has come unto me, and if not, I will know." Sounds very serious. And when you read it from the King James English, it sounds kind of strange in the way it is put. So let's unpack it a little bit. The men got up and headed in the direction of Sodom. Yes, that's the same Sodom as Sodom and Gomorrah. It was confirmed that Abraham suspected all along. You see, in verse 3, Abraham had said, "My Lord, if now I have found favor in thy sight, don't pass away, I pray thee, from thy servant." He suspected they were passing by for something more than just visiting him. Now, traditionally, in those days, hospitality, as well as providing asylum for the guest, included protection for a given time after leaving. Now, where did I get that? I got that from Zondervan Pictorial Encyclopedia of the Bible. The subject was hospitality. It meant everything. This would involve the host accompanying the guest a considerable distance before turning back home. It's no question that Abraham felt obligated to the honorable custom. His righteousness prompted the Lord to ask the rhetorical question that started with, "Shall I hide from Abraham that thing which I do?" That is what was asked. One asked the other two, "Shall I hide from Abraham that thing which I am gonna do?" How particularly inspiring I found verse 19. Verse 19 that we just read like this: "I know him, that he will command his children and his household after him, and they shall keep the way of the Lord to do justice and judgment." This is the first specific reference that we have in the Bible regarding the teaching of children. You know, do you realize that that is something a dad should be doing? This would seem to indicate that such instruction is the primary responsibility of the father, which I just said. This should take the form of a code of ethics or commandments, focusing first on our obligations to God. You see, in Christian circles, in a real Christian home, we're taught that the husband is really the pastor or priest of the family. And as such, it is his responsibility to nurture them in the fear of the Lord. And that is what the Lord here appeared to be saying about Abraham. Alas, that's what I'm saying. Alas, fathers who do this and take the awesome responsibility of being the spiritual leader in their home are few and far between. I've spoken and counseled with men in the past, and we went through scripture verses outlining our duties as fathers. And I can't remember how many times I was told, "What? I'm expected to do what? You've got to be joking me." No, seriously. That is a man's role. He's to be the spiritual head of his family. And that is a very serious responsibility. Now, in verses 20 and 21, the Lord addressed Abraham. "Because the cry of Sodom and Gomorrah is great, and because their sin is very grievous, I will go down now and see whether they have done according to the cry of it which has come to me." What were we reading now? Genesis 18, and we just read verses 20 and 21. Now, if you recall back in Genesis 15, verse 16, God mentioned the iniquity of the Amorites is not yet full. We mentioned that here is an expression of a recurring theme in Scripture that goes over and over again, but it's first mentioned in Genesis chapter 6, verse 3. The Bible shows that sin accumulates until the time when God's patience finally runs out and his anger and judgment explode explodes and rains down. Now back to the Amorites. Those wicked descendants of Canaan were finally destroyed with God's help when Joshua brought the Israelites back. Joshua chapter 10. Why do I mention all this? Well, the cities of the plain, Sodom in particular, had reached God's limit. Back in Genesis 13, verse 13, it said, "But the men of Sodom were wicked and sinners before the Lord exceedingly." Even after God marvelously delivered them through Abraham, and also after witnessing the righteous testimony of Melchizedek, they witnessed that. In spite of that, the kings of Sodom and Gomorrah reverted back to this gross wickedness, which was mentioned in Genesis 13:13. When the Lord said, "Their sin is very grievous," he surely meant exactly that. There was no sugarcoating it. They had reached his boiling point of wrath. God was out for vengeance. Abraham caught on very quickly, as we're going to see in the next few lessons. Folks, the way I see it, our world in the 21st century must be getting close to God's boiling point of wrath, too. As you read verses 23 to 32 of this chapter in the next two studies, may Abraham's poignant prayers of intercession inspire us to be intercessors too. Folks, there was more to God and the two angels' visits. They were out to destroy Sodom and Gomorrah. And on the way, greet Abraham.